women teachers probably finding themselves in a position that society won't expect teachers to be in. And whilst I don't know, I would question whether the pay would be different if the majority of the profession were men.
When we look at professions that are the lowest paid in society, they're dominated by women. It is no surprise to us that we are a workforce as teachers that is 80% women. We are fighting for status, we are fighting for pay, we are fighting for a workload that is manageable.
There are many gendered expectations, I think, of women, many who have caring responsibilities around the general household. Bills, for example, I'm thinking of food bills. I mean, I'm a carer also for one of my daughters, and to think about that in the sense of the pay gap for women, it's been quite important for me, for employers to recognise that. It's really important for employers, I think, to consider how we juggle all those additional responsibilities, and so much so that you begin to think, right, how can I manage this, or should I be looking at reducing, or being forced to almost thinking about part-time employment, which further impacts on the whole idea of gender pay difference, just further disadvantaging families and different households.
In teaching, we see the same trends that we see in the whole of society. We see women being overrepresented in precarious work and in part-time posts. And so women tend to make decisions that are based on their family's needs rather than a career trajectory. Women quite often will drop days because they need to look after their families. It's mainly women who make flexible working requests.
We see that women often work in caring roles within social care, social work, or within education, primarily a female-dominated profession. But they also have the additional responsibility of the caring role within the families, households, and they're also dealing with the pay gap. So one aspect is not paid, and the other aspect, they're actually facing a huge gap in terms of their earnings as comparable to their male counterparts.
I don't think it is fully known the impact of the cost of living crisis on women, but I do know that studies show that because women are carrying these extra responsibilities and carrying that extra mental load, that it is going to have a great impact on them. It's going to have a great impact on their daily life, on what they're going to have to sacrifice in order to make ends meet, and probably on their work-life balance as they're trying to juggle everything. I think when it comes to the teaching profession, it's often assumed, well, what if teachers got to moan about the teachers are on good salaries, and obviously across our profession men and women teachers are on equal pay. However, that doesn't take into consideration the number of women teachers who are working part-time. Every woman teacher I know who is working part-time, it's due to caring responsibilities now. That means they are not on the salary that is thrown around in the newspapers when teachers are taking action about pay at all.
It's very important that we mark the journey that women have been on. When the EIS was established in 1847, there were very, very few women in teaching. It was mainly male, and that was really because women were not allowed in universities. When the Education Scotland Act came into place, there was a greater need for women, so women began to filter into teaching jobs, but they did not have the same status as men. Until the 1960s, women could still be legally paid at a lower rate than men who were doing the same job. As well as that, because women they dominated primary schools, teaching jobs in primary schools, primary teaching was paid at a lower rate than secondary. And that didn't change until 1986. All of that has contributed to where we are now, the gender pay gap. Even today, even though we have equal rights to training, equal rights to education, equal rights to pay, We still see women underrepresented in secondary promoted posts. We still see women overrepresented in part-time posts, and so all of that is contributing to the gender pay gap, which is still 10% in Scotland.
Equal Pay Day is really important for me as a woman of colour. We know, and that we know from research of the gender pay gap, but when we look at the sort of intersectional aspect of that, I have several layers of disadvantage. I'm first and foremost a woman, so the gender pay gap hits me there. I'm also a woman of colour, and the third layer of disadvantage actually is I'm a visible Muslim, and all of those aspects impact against the gender gap, but also the ethnicity pay gap, which often isn't perhaps discussed as it should be. I find it really important because of the programmes that I teach across are again female-dominated professions, and I think it's really important to mobilise that workforce, that profession, to say we need to start asking questions about the gender pay gap. You need to be aware of that before you enter that profession.
EIS members on marking Equal Pay Day can talk to each other about it. They can talk in the staff room. The EIS always provides great resources. We've got posters, we've got books, we've got information. And I think that's probably the most important thing, is to actually talk about it, share experiences, raise awareness, talk to colleagues about it.
I think it's really important that we are active members of our union, because collectively we're stronger together. And I think there's a real need for us to start questioning and holding organisations to account and saying it may be okay for you to publish your gender pay gap statistics, but what next? Where's the meaningful change? Where's the action that's going to address that lack of parity?
As a union, we have a huge power. We have a teacher voice that we can use very loudly, very authoritatively, but what we must do is we join our voices together, and so we do that through organising in the workplace. We make sure that the decision makers in society, COSLA, Scottish Government, Westminster, even local governments, that they are aware that teachers are speaking up, that we're not prepared to settle for a society that treats women as less than their male counterparts. The first thing that members can do to mark Equal Pay Day is to remember that the campaign that we're in just now, the Pay Attention campaign, pay justice is at the heart of it. So we have to, when we're in the staff rooms and we're talking about why we need our 10%, we need it for our women, we need it to address the gender pay gap.
Fully informed members are much more powerful, and members who work together are much more powerful than someone speaking out on their own. If you were a teacher in 2018, you couldn't hide from that, and it was really evident on the march on George Square, when it felt like every teacher in Scotland was in Glasgow that day, and there was a real buzz and a real connectedness, and there was a unity in the profession. We were all out in the street, and everyone would look around and know that we were all in it together, and we were all fighting for the same thing, because it's important, because our profession is important, and teachers deserve to be paid well, and everyone needs to fight for that. Teaching is an essential profession, and in my opinion it's the best one there is. I feel very strongly that there shouldn't be a race to the bottom. It should be equal pay for everyone, and I think as teachers we need to fight for that too. So it's really important to mark Equal Pay Day and to raise awareness in teaching the issues with equal pay, but also in wider society as well.
For many of my colleagues of colour who are members of the union and will pay their fees, actually become actively involved, know your rights, and begin to discuss and raise that awareness with your fellow colleagues in your work setting. And that's really important, so that mobilising a space which is safe, which is brave, but really disrupting the status quo.